Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Swartwood here. Tonight, I am joined by the award-winning #1 international and New York Times best-selling author of numerous series, including Lincoln Rhyme, Coulter Shaw, and Catherine Dance, and the award-winning and Wall Street Journal best-selling author of the Nina Guerrera, Daniela Vega, and Veranda Cruz series, who together have written the Sanchez and Heron novels, Fatal Intrusion, and the most recent, the Grave Artist, which just came out this past Tuesday. That's right, it's your favorite writers of mine, Jeffrey Deaver and Isabella Maldonado. Jeffrey, Isabella, how the heck are you?
Excellent,
Great.
Robert. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, good seeing you both. So, as I mentioned in the green room, I typically do these live streams with just one writer. We kind of like, have a conversation. I had done this in the past with two authors before. It's a little bit different. So we're probably not gonna be able to spend too much time, obviously, because time is limited. And I do appreciate you making time for this. But what I always love trying to talk about is just, kind of where writers start and then where they end up. So obviously, you're both at a stage in your careers where you're writing these really great best-selling series books. But obviously, every writer really starts, at zero from a very first novel and kind of builds up. Isabella, your first novel, at least the first published novel, as far as I could tell, was Blood's Echo that came out in what, 2017? Was that your
Mhm.
first published novel or was that your first novel?
That is my first novel, period.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about kind of like the inspiration? Like how long did that take? I mean, like what made you want to sit down? Because I always say like, it's almost, I don't want to necessarily call it a mental health, but like it's crazy for people to have these ideas in their heads where they want to sit down isolated for hours at a time, just, typing away on a typewriter or whatever. I mean, like, yeah, what made you decide that you wanted to write a novel?
I always knew I wanted to write a novel, but I had this whole career in law enforcement going on in the middle. So, so it wasn't until I retired from that career after 22 years, that I actually had some time. And then after retiring, I spent 5 years really learning the art and craft of writing. And because police writing is completely different from fiction writing, or at least it should be. So I had to learn how to do creative writing and or relearn it because it had been since college. So I worked on that really hard, and then basically when it came time, and I published three short stories just so I could sort of, I was kind of finding my voice that way. Like, I wrote one in first person, one in third person close, one in, I mean, I did it different ways to sort of see, and they were published.
Yeah.
Also to teach myself how to take edits before I tackled a novel.
So what were you like who were you reading at that time? Like what was the inspiration and had it always been this type of genre? Because sometimes I find
Yeah.
writers, they might have an interest in one genre and then find out later that their passion is really a completely different genre. So like was it always this crime thriller
Yeah.
type fiction?
Yeah. Especially, I tell you what, it's kind of, you're kind of picky when when you're in law enforcement and you like reading crime novels. There were only a few, I think, who, were just really exciting to read, who I think are people who were non-professionals who managed to write law enforcement characters really well. And Jeff is one of them. The Lincoln Rhyme series, extremely well done. J.A. Jance is another one. The J.P. Beaumont series, very, very convincing. And Michael Connolly with Harry Bosch. And again, they're not law enforcement people, but they managed to write these characters and really caught the essence of it. And that was kind of inspiring to me to think, you know what? What would it be like for me to write a novel having actually been there? How would that go? Well, let's try.
And then so in terms of the Blood's Echo, that's the first book
Mhm.
and I think it was three books in the series. Was it initially
Yes.
going to be a series? Because I've sometimes also found that writers might write what they think is a standalone, and then for one reason or another, maybe the editor publisher is like, "Hey, could you continue this in a second book?" Like, or from the very start, did you know like, okay, this is going to be the book one in a series?
Well, very weirdly and interestingly, I had always planned that to be four books in the beginning. And I actually had like my character arc all planned out for each of the four books and everything, even before I wrote the first one. So I knew where I was going with it. And I like to do that. Before I embrace a character, I like to have an idea where the character's going. So I did that, but then I was with like a mid-sized press at the time, and it went out of business after three books.
Hmm.
So it just it kind of like languished. But the good news is that my current publisher, I am now writing that book four that I always wanted to, and it's coming out next year. It's so
Oh,
exciting.
that's
Yeah.
really, really cool. Oh, very cool.
Mhm.
Well, what about you, Jeffrey? When I was looking at your Wikipedia, from what I could tell, at least the first one they have listed, back in 1988, Manhattan is My Beat, although that you said is not your one of your actually your first novel.
No, like Isabella, I've always wanted to write. I was a nerd when I was growing up, and but I was a nerd when it meant something. Now, if you're a nerd, you've got an app and a Silicon Valley hedge fund is behind you, and you're a billionaire. No, I was a nerd. I was like a Leave It to Beaver nerd, and so I was drawn to writing. That was my only real interest in writing and reading. But I knew even then that you can't be a prodigy writer. Artists, musicians are, but writers cannot be. They have to live for a while. So I picked professions that would kind of help me eventually become a published fiction author. And I wanted to be a genre writer. I wanted to support myself doing it. And we know there's some Man Booker winners who can literary writers who can support themselves. But first, I didn't have the talent for that, and also I didn't want to kind of sail the seas of true literary criticism. So I wanted to be a genre writer, and I decided crime was the one I read more. Of course, I love Lord of the Rings. I love Ray Bradbury and science fiction, but my feeling was generally that I wanted my stories and then my books to have the most emotional reaction on the part of readers they could. And with all respect to the romantasy and the Game of Thrones stuff, there's that there's that leap that we have to make between the immediacy of our lives and the emotional tension of their lives. And people love them. Of course, you can't argue with 100,000 sales, this romantasy stuff. But I felt crime is real. Crime we see on the street. The guy we're sitting next to on the bus might not be a serial killer. So I wanted to chill readers that way and bring them into the reality of life. So make a long story short, I was a journalist like yourself. I was an attorney for a while, and then I finally started to feel confident enough, and reading all the time, feel confident enough to begin to write, and I did. So I published a couple of books with a Paper Jacks was the company. I think ultimately either went out of business or was acquired by somebody like, I think, Knightsbridge. I can't really recall. That was in the 80s, early to late 80s, mid 80s. And but damn it, I got a book published. And then I said I have to get serious about it and kind of change my technique. Then Manhattan is My Beat, an Edgar nominated novel came out. That was also a paperback original. And then a book a year, at least a book a year since the 1980s. And then I quit my law job in I think, 89 and have been a full-time novelist ever since.
And you're very well known, or at least I feel like you're very well known in being a very huge outliner where you spend, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you will spend weeks, months working on an outline before actually sitting down and getting, and actually drafting the actual novel because everything is there. Was that always the case, like from that very first book, or is that something that you developed over, the
So
course of several decades?
yeah, very good question. No, it wasn't always the case. So my first, let's say, six novels, I'm known for my plots and my twists, always surprises. That's big surprise endings, plural. It's my trademark. Okay, I hammered out my first three books, a lot of work, a lot of going back, get to chapter 13 and say, damn, this is a good idea. I'm going to go back, but I got to rewrite chapter 3, 7, and 4, 14 to get there. I said, well, two of them were nominated for Edgars. I think one for nominated for an Anthony. And yet I felt it's inefficient. It would be much better to do the structuring first because these books are about structure. I would rather read a well-structured book with the plots, the twists, the turns, everything integrated, than a book that has the brilliance of like Annie Proulx's lyrical writing or Cormac McCarthy's lyrical writing, the style, in other words. Combination of the two is breathtaking. And then you get a Thomas Harris. But anyway, I wanted to structure everything. So I bought back the rights to my first six books and rewrote them. Not Manhattan is My Beat. That was pretty, that was not a bad book. But the first, I should say, the first five books, other than that, rewrote them after I outlined them. And from then on, I outlined everything. You got to, I tell my students, you need to know where you're going. Joyce Carol Oates, you can't write your first sentence until you know what the last sentence is.
Right. And so, Isabella, what about you? How is like from that very first novel, was that something where you just, sometimes people just have that character in mind where they'll sit down at a basic story idea and kind of go from there? Or are you also like an outliner, or maybe not to the extent of Jeffrey,
Yeah.
but I mean, yeah. So where are you kind of at there?
Yeah, I do outline and from the very first book, I did outline, but just not to that extreme degree that, that we do now. It was more of like it's like I start with the major plot points, like I know, like I figure out how I want like the beginning to be, and then I figure out kind of, where what I want to happen kind of at the midpoint and then at the climax. I kind of have had those, and then I start filling in some of the plot points in between. It's kind of an interesting way that I work it, and I flesh out some of that. But a lot of times they are just simply, plot points with overall descriptions, and it is not as in depth. Like my outline, my first outline when I get started will be maybe like 15, 20 pages at the most. Jeff's will be like 60 pages to start with and then go up from there. So in reality, I he does work more efficiently, and I am trying to get myself into that mode because I do think it's very wasteful when you have to cut so many chapters or scenes because you realize they don't work.
Yeah. What about voice, Jeffrey? For you, I mean, how was there a certain book where you felt like you were really in the groove of things, where you really have what you feel is the, quote unquote Jeffrey Deaver voice? And the same thing for you, Isabel. I don't know who wants to like, answer that first, but I mean, I feel like sometimes with some authors it takes a while, and sometimes they find their voice pretty immediate, where they have that style, that distinct style that they keep throughout, most of their career.
Well, in my case, I never really thought about it. I have tried unsuccessfully to adopt a rather artificial voice. And I spoke a moment ago about the stylists, Annie Proulx, Cormac McCarthy, Thomas Harris, people who put words together so beautifully. Um, and my success was non-existent. I couldn't do it. I think, and I tell my students, you've got a voice within you that's could be conversational, it could be more formal, but
Here's the
you
forecast for
don't,
tomorrow.
you should just channel it, you know?
With a high of
Excuse me for a minute. Alexa, stop. Um, I actually have her on, I was going to use the name, I have her on mute. I almost spelled out mute because I didn't know what she'd do with that. But as an amusing anecdote, I'm having a fight with Alexa right at the moment, and she may have ignored it. Anyway, I digress. But so where were we? I'm sorry, Robert.
You're talking about telling your students about the idea, I guess, was it the
Oh, yeah.
voice or
It's just it should be natural. Just sit down
yeah,
and write, and it will come out. Don't try to write like somebody else. Simply be conversational about it, and the more formal you are, I think the more distant you become from your readers.
yeah.
Mhm.
What about you,
Mhm.
Isabella?
Well, I didn't even realize that I had like a real strong voice right away from the point that when I mentioned that I started by writing short stories, I remember, when I started submitting those when for publication, it was the immediate feedback I got is this is a really voicey read. It's you've got like a really strong voice, which was fascinating for me because it wasn't like I was putting any effort into doing that. I was speaking very naturally. I don't I don't, put a lot of artifice into my prose in that way. It's pretty plain. And that's another thing that Jeff and I, one of the reasons we can write well together is because our style is similar enough. And from the very first time, the very first book I had published, there were readers that would compare it with Jeff's books, which I thought was really interesting because it isn't like I set out to imitate anybody. It's just we have a natural similar style.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's get in the whole collaboration period. So we're here obviously to discuss and promote the second book, The Grave Artist, that just came out again this past Tuesday. The first novel in the series, Fatal Intrusion, came out last year. As I think we discussed a little briefly in the green room, neither of you had really collaborated before. I think Jeffrey, you said you had done a short story, but that was about the extent of it. And Isabella, I think you said you hadn't really done any kind of collaboration. Collaboration can be tough. Some writers, it's natural for them. They're able to do it easily enough. Others, it's, again, writing is oftentimes a very solitary, you're doing your own thing. Can you talk about like just kind of, I guess, how this came about? Because it's, I mean, like who approached who, like where these characters come from.
Uh-huh.
I'll let
Sure.
Isabella start that story.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's good to introduce it.
I'll start it. And I mean, and it'd be interesting. I don't know how many times Jeff may have been approached, but I have no idea. But it all started when we went to the Murder and Mayhem Writers Conference. I believe it was in 2018. It might have been 2017. But we went to that conference. I think it was 2018. Anyway, it was around St. Patrick's Day in Chicago, and it was a great conference. And we were there in the green room. We were both there to speak. We were on different panels and things, and the other person in the green room was Gillian Flynn, who wrote Gone Girl. And so the three of us just started joking because, I mean, why not? You're at a writers' conference, you may as well joke around. But we were the only ones there, and so we just started cracking each other up, and we started joking about, what if the three of us wrote a book together? And so, like, what would be the most outrageous, ridiculous thing? And the idea was, what if there was like a baby mafioso who was like, taking over the city? I mean, we're in Chicago. It's like you have to think like that, right? So, and then the punchline was, his diapers aren't the only thing that's loaded. And so we just were making each other laugh, and we had a really good time. And then didn't think anything too much more of it. And then later in New York at the International Thriller Writers Thriller Fest conference, we were there, and maybe a year or two later. And so this time, Jeff and I were talking, and it came up something about collaborating or whatever. Also at that time, I had asked him to blurb the cipher, and so that was good. I didn't know that this was going to happen this way, but he got a chance to read my work, and so he could see how I write. I just really wanted a blurb, but it worked to our benefit because then he could see that my style was similar. And then finally, he was at the Poison Pen, and I went there, and afterwards we got together and we were talking about it. And it was like, yeah, maybe we need to not just joke about it, but maybe we need to be serious about doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Does that
and
sound right,
one
Jeffrey?
of the things one of the things that was so significant in our decision, well, first of all, and we get into some of the nitty gritty, but we were friends, beforehand. We enjoyed each other's company, and I respected her work. She respected mine. And so the idea came up, well, let's see. We write in the same style. And by that, I mean, as Isabella referred to a moment ago, third person close. We don't do first person character driven stories. We pay a lot of attention to our characters, but essentially they're plot driven books. And we both write thrillers. And within the world of crime fiction, as you well know, but for some of your viewers and listeners out there, the world of crime fiction is divided into two categories. One are I'd call the murder mysteries, a la Agatha Christie, and they ask the question in the reader's mind, what happened? Question mark, unraveling the mystery. Those are fun. I mean, I learned how to make twists from Agatha Christie. They're wonderful, but that's not really what I do. I like what I call the second category, a thriller. And that asks the question, what is going to happen? Are we going to find the bomb before it blows up? Are we going to stop the terrorist? Are we going to stop the serial killer? A question on every page. And we both do that. And and write primarily the past tense, shifting points of view, so we don't have the problem of unreliable narrators when you write in the first person. You can maintain the twists and surprises to the very end. And we thought, well, let's give it a try. So out came, and I think in both the instances, Isabella has had the inspiration for the germ of the story, and then we sit down and begin the outline process. And over the course of a couple months, we end up with an outline that's maybe in the old days, the outline used to be divided according to sections when we had longer chapters. Now it's a streaming world. So we start with 52 chapters, not sections. And then when we divided up the chapters, who's going to write what, we picked one. Isabella wrote more of the Carmen Sanchez chapters. I wrote more of the Jake Herron chapters, but that was not necessarily the rule of law. We would jump back and forth. I would write from Carmen's point of view. She would write from Jake's. And we kind of, flipped a coin to see who had the pleasure of writing from the bad guys' points of view, because that's always fun. And then we ruthlessly edited each other. And I know I've gone on for a bit here, but I'll say the one rule we had was that this was a no ego zone. We could ruthlessly, in fact, we encouraged each other to ruthlessly edit the other person's work. And in that way, we created a book that was really geared not for our egos, but for the sake of the reader's enjoyment and experience.
Yeah, yeah, and the books. I mean, I'm only halfway through Grave Artist right now, but Fatal Intrusion, a lot of fun, great book. So which character though kind of came first there? Was it Carmen or Jake? And then like like how did the other? I mean, did you know? I guess was the idea to always be because like you've all, but I don't want to say this. You each have written several different series that usually focuses on one main character. Obviously, the Lincoln Rhyme series you have is it's been Amelia, and
Yeah.
but primarily it's a Lincoln Rhyme, and then the same thing. You had the Cipher series. The Nina Gu-
Guerrera.
Guerrero Guerrero books. Oh God, I told you I was going to mess that up. But I mean, again, you're focusing only on that. Was the idea always to really kind of have? I don't want to call it like a buddy type thing, but like to have like two kind of main characters in this series.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, we knew we wanted to do something like that. And if you think about it, so the two characters, you have like a Latina law enforcement type, and then you have the male is kind of this professorial type, but also, very cool and edgy. So you think about it, I mean, it's really it's like that part came naturally, and then they're so different from each other, and they work so differently, and they butt heads. And then Jeff had this genius idea for Jake Herron, where he came up with the concept of being an intrusionist. And
Yes.
Jeff, I don't know if you want to explain
Yes,
how you
I
came
was
up
going
with
to
that.
ask about that.
Great.
Like,
It's
I was
very
trying to Google
cool.
that beforehand. Like, is that? I guess it is a
No, that's
thing,
new.
but like, it's not a well-known thing. I guess I should say.
No, I made it up from whole cloth. It's not a thing at all.
But isn't it like, I
But
mean, they have like people like they have like kind of like white hat hackers that like
oh,
Yeah.
there's
oftentimes try
that.
to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
things.
Yeah.
yeah. There's definitely that. But the term intrusionist, I just thought, I don't know, it sounds cool. Let's try it.
Okay.
But for your viewers and listeners, Jake is an intrusionist. He was a black hat hacker, and I don't want to say much about his prior career, but he was kind of a Robin Hood. He'd break into the emails of people like Harvey Weinstein and bust him, into the emails of people like some CEOs who've misbehaved on their taxes, to bust them. He didn't do it for his own profit, but then he himself got busted and turned into a white hat hacker and a security consultant. And he's also on a mission to, through his courses and his social media, to inform people of the dangers of intrusion within their lives. And it's become a bit of well, I say religion in a sense that might be taken improperly, but he is totally devoted to making sure people protect themselves from government corporate intrusion and familial intrusion. Um, he teaches a course in domestic abuse, which is one of the most perfidious forms of intrusion there is, because the abuser usually has an in to get through the defenses of somebody that would otherwise be more aware of himself or herself and their surroundings. And so this seemed like a perfect blending of somebody who doesn't really play by the rules and a federal agent, Carmen Sanchez, who has to play by the rules. Otherwise, the convictions get thrown out, or the arrests are the prosecutor decides not to move forward because there's not enough evidence there. So we had that conflict between them. So he doesn't play by the rules. She does has to play by the rules. But also, what else? Yes, they're a man and a woman. They're both unattached. And we have to add that little soap opera element because we want to keep the pot boiling on every page. I mean, we want these to be one sitting reads. And Robert, we forgive you for not finishing yet. I know you've had other things in your life that have obviously intruded, but after, as soon as we're through here, you're gonna open a beer, get a cup of coffee, and finish the book, right? Because you're in
Yeah,
such suspense.
I picked it up the other day. They are absolutely fast reads. I
And it
actually
was
listened to
only
the audiobook of A Fatal Intrusion, but yes.
well, I'm joking because it only came out like a day ago, so you can be
Well,
forgiven.
your kind publicist did send me an early copy, but I had other stuff that unfortunately, yes, very busy. So let me ask you this. Um, so this obviously, I guess behind the scenes when this was announced, it was a two-book deal. So from the very start, Fatal Intrusion was going to be book one. So you knew from the very beginning this was going to be a series. How much did you initially have planned out? Like from book one, did you have an idea where you wanted to take these characters? Because there is in book one, there is a bad guy that kind of crosses, I mean, like how much planning, like when you're working on a series, and I guess this really applies to both of you because you both work on different series. Jeffrey, obviously, you've worked on very long running series. Um, do you usually have kind of like an end game in sight of like, okay, this series could be maybe 5, 6 books, and if it goes longer, great, or like an overall arc? So like, yeah, for this particular series, was there an idea like we definitely have an idea for X number of books, and if we get more, great, but we definitely want to tell, the story in this number of books.
I don't really remember. Did we talk about it much, Isabella? I mean, we knew there would be a launch. Some characters and conflicts would launch into a the next book, but I don't know that we had a major arc for anything, did we?
I don't know about a major arc, but we knew we were going for more than one book to begin with, and so we gave our agents a proposal in the beginning, and it was, a two-book proposal that included, a synopsis and the first couple chapters, just, very typical of that. And so it was purchased two books on that proposal. So that we always knew that. And then after we were done, even when we were writing the second one, we were already thinking about what we wanted to do for the third one. So yeah.
And that,
Okay,
that
yeah, I
brings
mean,
up a very good point that we had the outline, but we should make clear that the outline is not set in stone. So we would find maybe toward the end of Fatal Intrusion, one of the subplots about Carmen's sister
mhm.
and a conflict she has with her sister and some family issues there that would appear in the next book. But I can't say we had that necessarily planned out from the very beginning. Just like Jake's family, his parents were in a cult and they neglected uh, Jake and his brother for the sake of the cult, ironically called the family with the capital F, and they neglected their lowercase family, as often happens. And so that is now, without our planning it, it's logical that will be a subplot in the third book. So I don't think there really was, and I don't think in any of my, well, in the Coulter Shaw books, that's the character who's the He's the reward seeker. And I knew the first three books in the series, The Never Game, The Goodbye Man, and The Final Twist. That was going to be a hard arc that resolved a big family conflict about the death of his father. And
Right.
once that was done, the series could have ended. But then we had the TV show. It became, well, I was going to continue to write them anyway, but they became much more popular. And so once I got that out of the way, then I could just continue to write. And I think I've got five or six of those now without any arc concept at all. He's just driving around the country trying to find things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great character and conceit because I feel like sometimes when you have certain series, if it's like, a small town sheriff, it's like, well, if you're just in a small town, how much can you really do? Like, how are you doing
Yeah.
25 books in that series? But again,
No.
with Colter Shaw, he's all over the place. He kind of has that wandering thing too. For Isabella, so I'd like to kind of discuss with both of you, but let's start with you. In terms of just like juggling multiple series, like what are you doing from a writer standpoint? Like, are you keeping a nice kind of list or like a small Bible of like what's happening in each book and those characters so that when you go, so like you mentioned, you're going to be working on the fourth book of your very
Hmm.
first series that were published, quite a while ago. Like, are
Yeah.
are are you like revisiting those first three books to get a sense, or like do you already
Yeah.
have kind of like a list of those
Yeah.
characters and the ideas? I mean, yeah, like how does that work there to make sure that you're
Yeah.
keeping things separate and not kind of doing overlapping?
Mhm.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I haven't done that before where I had to go back like this. And actually what I did, and I found it extremely helpful. It was interesting to hear you talk about listening to the audiobook of the first book, Fatal Intrusion. I listened to the audio version of those first three books over and over and over to sort of get back into that mindset. And that was extremely helpful. That way, like when I was running errands or doing whatever, it was just kind of getting into my head. I'd even go to sleep listening to it to just get it into my brain and everything. And it really was very helpful. And then also going back through and I read through them as well. So, you really do have to, after a long gap like that, because you want it to be a seamless experience for the reader. There are some readers who've been writing for years that they really want to know what happens next because it's obvious that there always should have been more to the story. Even though, I mean, it isn't like a cliffhanger, but the story's resolved, but it's obvious there's more to tell. So there's those people who haven't also read in a long time, and then there'll be new people who will come along and read it straight through. So you want it to feel natural and organic to everybody.
Yeah. But then are you keeping like are you
Hmm.
somebody who is keeping like a character list as you're writing the books and then are you like setting that aside for like when you're coming back in because because again
Hmm.
you're writing several different
Yeah. Yeah,
series so
exactly.
obviously
Yeah.
you want to make sure
Yeah.
that maybe what happens in one book you're not kind of like I don't want to say plagiarizing yourself but like you're not like doing like an
Yeah.
action scene that like like
Yes.
happened in this book.
I know, and it's true. And you really don't want to get repetitive by accident, even, and be like, wait a minute, someone dropped out of a helicopter and went and you don't want to write exactly the same kind of thing either. So, fortunately for me, and, I'm sure Jeff is the same way, when going through a regular traditional publisher, they kind of give you like a little bit of a Bible with scenes and everything laid out, and you can look like and get a bird's eye view at like what the shape of each story is and kind of generally what happens in each scene to make sure, and a list of all the characters, and so you don't accidentally name somebody the same name, or that kind of, or you keep all the descriptions the same and that sort of thing. So I do have like almost like a database for each book.
Yeah. I think it was Mark. I think I saw somewhere Mark Greaney had talked about for his Gray Man series. His publisher sends him a PDF of the finished book that's
Mhm.
going to be printed, and he's able to basically combine all the PDFs so that he has all the books in one huge PDF and can just do a quick find in terms of like a character name or whatever else to make sure like easily find something or make sure nothing has been used before. What about you, Jeffrey? I mean, you've written so many different series. A lot of them are very long-standing series. How how do you manage to keep track of, like when you're going from a Lincoln book to then another, Coulter Shaw novel, like to keep these characters, separate in their
Sure.
separate universes?
Sure. Well, database is the key word. I have a wonderful social media director, and Jane Davis. She's wonderful. And in addition to that, she does a very brief synopsis of each book, or actually each short story, and then has a database of the details of the characters. Um, was because readers care about the characters. They want to know. They want to make sure that they're consistent, and they have to be left-handed, right-handed. What kind of weapon does Coulter carry? Where does he carry it? That's all very important, and so we make sure that that happens. I've written 100. I think I'm up to 120 short stories now, and I tell you, I'll wake up in the middle of the night. I'm never inspired by dreams, and anybody out there who thinks dreams inspire you probably isn't going to happen. It's kind of a regurgitation of the day's events. And, if you want to write a story, roll up your sleeves, sit down and think up an original idea. But let's say I have an original idea, and then I say, oh, that's going to be such a great story, dot, 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 which I wrote 7 years ago. And I go back to sleep because, you want to, give somebody. There's a joke in Hollywood that when a producer is trying to make a movie, he or she wants something, a book or an idea that's been, wildly successful in the past, and yet is completely original. And you scratch your head and you say, well, that's Hollywood. It's easy to laugh at Hollywood, but there's a lot of truth to that. So in our case, when Isabella and I are writing these books, we give our readers what they want, and the template for that is the thriller, as I said, moves very quickly with characters that are fully fleshed out. There's a little, frisson between them, both professionally and personally. Readers love that. And then we just want to make sure that we give them that plus something new, like the new twist or the new take we had in on serial killing in The Grave Artist. That's something that's relatively unique. And so then back to the drawing board for the next book, of course.
Yeah. Real quick about short stories, and I remember talking to you about this at Thriller Fest a couple years back. Triangle remains just a great short story for anybody who has
Thank
not
you.
read it. It is one of those very clever stories that you read at the end, you're like, oh my God. And then, but if you go back and reread it, everything is there. It is very obvious, which I think makes, the perfect type of short story like that. And again, I can't really talk about what it's about without giving anything away, but it's a
It's
really great
hard. It's
story.
hard to talk about, and
Yeah.
it's in my collection, Twisted. If anybody does want to read it, and it's one I'm rather. I have to say I'm rather proud of because I like to pull the wool over people's eyes.
And I think when we discussed that at Thriller Fest, you even mentioned that someone had mentioned about like, oh, this would make a great movie. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
how would that even be possible?
Yeah, yeah, and if anybody out there reads it, you'll be scratching your head saying, "No, this cannot be." And I'll tell you that again, I know there's some people out there who are writing or thinking about writing, and that is the advantage of writing from various points of view. Now, that was written from the first person point of view. Not going to say anything more about that, but we were so focused on that individual and the reaction that other people around him, I can give his gender away, had to him, that we were convinced one thing, and yet at the end we learned that all our expectations were completely shattered. So no, it's not going to be a movie, but it's a fun story.
Yeah. Speaking of short stories, I know you said you've been doing a lot of more novella length works recently, but still, you must have a good number of short stories. I mean, the last collection you had out was what? It's on my bookshelf. Trouble in Mind. I mean, like, is there any plans for like another short story collection coming out
Oh,
anytime soon?
I've got three anthologies ready to go, which is kind of waiting. One will be out next year. It's called Dead Ends, plural, with an
Okay.
original Coulter story, an original Lincoln Rhyme story. And then the other stories most American readers will not have seen. I published original works in Europe and the Far East. And then like with a like BoucherCon, for instance, they asked me to write an original story that was in the program. Well, nobody saw that. Well, the attendees did, of course. So that's in the collection. So these will be primarily new stories, but yeah, I've got probably 80, maybe not. I've probably got 60 that I have to put into anthologies and publish them at some point. They'll happen, and then I just wrote two more the other day, last weekend. Still have to find a home for them, but we'll get that worked out one way or the other.
You're just popping out stuff. How much do you write? Like, I mean, what is a typical day for you? And also, Isabella, I also want to know from you too, like, uh, I mean, Jeffrey, I mean, how many words are you essentially writing every day?
Well,
Were you
actually,
doing like two novels a year?
Isabel and I are exactly the same. That's one of the reasons we work so well together. It's it's 8 hours a day. We have personal lives. I have a partner. She has a husband and son, and that's and family. That is certainly our responsibility, of course. And I have younger people in the family. My 19-year-old niece just took me to a concert where two things were quite wonderful. Live music is alive and well. It's absolutely wonderful. And do not forget your earplugs. That's a very important rule. But anyway, so we have personal lives, but we just love writing. So I do it, I don't think about word count. I think about, I get 8, 10 hours a day of writing in, and I'm relatively happy.
Yeah.
For me, it's a little more chaotic at times, depending on what's going on. It's a little bit better now that my son is older and in high school and whatnot. When he was younger, when I was starting to write, I could probably best describe my day as basically one long interruption punctuated by sporadic writing. Um, it was just unbelievable trying to, there was no office, no door. It was just constant interruption, chaos, bedlam, a little kid, a new puppy. It was crazy. But now things are more settled. The dog has grown up. He still acts like a puppy in many ways. Um, my son's in high school, so I have 2 more years to get through. He's a junior. And then I feel like, it'll be a little more settled, but it's working well now, and I am able to get in hours at a time. Then I just only have to worry about my distractibility being an issue.
Yeah. So do you typically like to just sit at the computer for like hours on end, or do you find it's helpful to maybe do like an hour and then take a break and come back to it?
I have to get up and move around. And otherwise, your body, it just gets so stiff and sore. And as a matter of fact, I just started going to a gym. I'm like, I have to force myself to do it. It's like, I just want to write, but it's like, no, no, I'm really going to have to actually force myself to get a trainer and work out and stuff just to keep up with everything that's going on. And I also have various spots around my house. I refer to them as think spots. If I get stuck on a plot problem, I will go to a totally different area. And sometimes I'll even take like pen and paper because you do use a different part of your brain and think about what I need to do and like how and brainstorm how I need to get out of this plot problem or issue. See, this is what Jeff does when he's outlining. So he doesn't have to worry about doing it when he's writing.
Yeah. Well, now I will say that interesting. Isabel and I have done many events, and this is the first time I've heard about that. But it's oddly parallel that I will pace a great deal, and I'm in my kitchen now. I turn my computer around and show you, but there are some dishes and things. It's kind of a mess. But anyway, and if I may here, I will turn my phone
Oh,
down. I do have another co-writer.
aw.
Isabel, I hope you think I'm not
Oh,
being unfaithful because I know you have
No,
buddies.
yes, I
This
have
is
Buddy.
this is jealous. She's kind of jealous at the moment, but I will pace a great deal. In fact, I had COVID in Germany about 3 years ago, and there they take it rather seriously. I was locked down by the police. It was a four-star hotel, but I was locked down. I spent 10 days writing the whole time, and that was like 12 hours a day. And I paced, thinking about the idea, where's the plot going to come from, who are the characters going to be. And I set up a little station with paper and I wrote the ideas. I had my computer there too. And one day, according to my smart watch, I walked in the hotel room 4.5 miles, pacing to get the story down. And I tell my students whatever works, works. But the other thing I tend sometimes not to tell my students, okay, good job. You can do your own podcast, dog. You want that you've got to love it. You have to enjoy it. It's the one thing you can't teach somebody. I would write no matter what. I enjoy the act of telling stories, even when it doesn't work. I enjoy the act of wrestling with it. And there are people who I can see they want to have written. I'm speaking to my students now, or people who come up to me in the conferences. They want to have written, meaning they want to be J.K. Rowling now. They want to be Michael Connelly now after all the success. But they don't want to be the J.K. Rowling who sat, if I remember the story correctly, in her closet banging out, the hundreds. Well, I don't know how long the books are. I'm more of a Lord of the Rings fan, but the entire series of books is huge, hundreds of thousands of pages, I guess, or many words. And she just loved doing that. And that's the thing that, you can't really teach somebody to do. It has to kind of go with the territory within your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so we're really chugging along in terms of time. So I want to get to the Grave Artist. Isabella, what can you tell us about the Grave Artist and kind of where we find Carmen and Jake now in this book?
Well, it's interesting because you can read it by itself as a standalone, but I really recommend reading the first one. It does kind of pick up where the first one left off, but it's not required. But I think you will absolutely enjoy it so much more. And I mean, I've read some of the comments people have said. They're like, "Oh, I picked up this one. Now I really do want to go back and read the first one. I wish I had or whatever." So in that sense, we are Jake and Carmen are kind of thrown together in book one, and here we are in book two, and they are working together in kind of an ad hoc pilot program. And this is kind of their first case, their first official case. And so it's really a wild ride. And the idea is we wanted to do something that was really different. And so Jeff came up with this concept of serial killing 2.0.
Yeah, it's have we heard about serial killers before? Yes, I think the whole world has been Dextered, if I may use that verb. And they're a great convention for crime fiction because of the thriller concept I was mentioning. What is going to happen? If there's a murder mystery, the parson was murdered in the back of the rectory. Well, we've got to find out what happened. But there's not a lot of sweaty palm stuff there necessarily. But serial killers are great. But then again, we've seen a lot of, James Gumb from Silence of the Lambs. Hannibal Lecter himself was. John Sanford writes about serial killers. A lot of people do. And we thought, and we have ourselves, but we thought, what if there was something different? And we have to tread a little carefully because our books are filled with surprises and reveals and twists and turns. But I can say this, that what if we had a character, a fully formed villain, because the villain is the hero of his or her own story. This is a fully formed character, Damon Gar. And what if he were sad? What if he were unhappy because he'd killed somebody, plotted it out? It was like the first step of becoming a serial killer. And it was like, meh, who cares? And the poor guy is despondent, but then he comes up with this idea that he needs to, all I'll say is like, spread the grief, spread what happens as an aftermath of the serial killing. And suddenly he comes into his own.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I'm like halfway through. I just started the other day. It's a really quick read. Really excited to see where it goes. We talked a little bit about obviously the plotting and the outlining of the books, and that you both kind of take your own chapters. And how much of when you were writing, I guess, so you outline it, and then someone takes some of the chapters from someone's point of view, like are you doing chapter one and then sending it to the other person to kind of go back and forth? I mean, like, or are you kind of doing like, okay, Jeff, you're going to do chapters 2, 5, and 7, and then like, how is that kind of like, yeah, how's that collaboration process for you both?
Well, to make it work well, I came up with this sort of template in Word. So I set it up as a document where the instead of like a chapter number, because those get too crazy and unwieldy, it's like a chapter title, and the title's going to go away. It becomes a number in the final book. But while we're writing, the title will be like just a real quick idea of what happens in that chapter. Like Jake finds a clue, or like Jake finds a footprint, something like, as an example. It isn't it, but anyway, um you know somebody gets shot, whatever. That is the title of the chapter, and then I hyperlink those into the actual script manuscript, so that way we can just say. And what we did before is we would sort of call dibs. We're like, oh, I'll do that one, I'll do that one, I'll do that one, and then we kind of, like color code, we highlight the chapters that we want to write, and then we hyperlink to them and do it. And this is, I think, a really important key thing to understand, is that we do that. And like in the first draft, we're just sort of spitting it all out. It's already outlined. We know what's going to happen in each chapter. But two things. One, it's not written in stone. And if we get inspired while we're writing a chapter and we're like, you know what, this would be better if it turned out this way, or if it ended here, or whatever, this part of it. That's one. And then two, we go back and we ruthlessly edit so that it is a smooth read for the reader. Um, Readers really can't tell who wrote what, and sometimes we can't tell who wrote what.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
we go.
I wanted to ask you about that whole, like, when you are going over those chapters, and you mentioned before, like, there's no ego, so you are really being merciless in terms of editing each other. Like, do you find yourselves kind of like rewriting maybe certain passages to
Oh
kind of,
yeah.
to like
Yeah.
it's like your distinct styles are not necessarily like, oh, I can tell that, Jeffrey wrote
Mhm.
this or Isabella wrote this.
Mhm.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And, we are very fortunate that we have a similar voice. And I tend to write long. Isabella tends to write a little shorter. And so I write too long. I digress some. It's like one of the worst crimes as a writer. So we'll have to cut some of that. And that's fine. And, I will say we have not had there's been absolutely no uh, dissent. We've disagreed about certain things creatively, but it's always in good spirits, and we respect each other's opinion. She'll say something, objectively, this probably wouldn't work, and I say, oh, absolutely, and I've done the same thing. And so it has been just, first of all, a very enjoyable experience. And we're hearing from readers that it's a seamless read. They simply cannot tell. And in fact, I think I complimented Isabel on a wonderful paragraph, and she said, "No, Jeff, you wrote that." So, although it may have gone the other way, I can't even remember now. But that's the way it's worked.
Yeah.
And I had here actually in the promotional stuff I got, and I think this was probably announced, so it's safe to talk about. But I mean, this series has been optioned. Obviously, we probably can't get into details. Or is there any kind of movement on that, or is it just still just kind of an option right now?
Well, see, if we said anything about that, I don't know
It
if you
will
saw
jinx it.
the
That's
end of
true.
Breaking Bad, a little red dot would appear on our foreheads from the
That's true. Well, let's talk about something that I guess we can because it's been out. I mean, obviously you mentioned before, Coulter Shaw. Obviously, your series was adapted into the CBS show Tracker,
Mhm.
which I believe you said it's coming up on its third season, correct?
Third season premieres in October. I don't know the exact date, but that's available on my website. If I can shamelessly say, jeffreydeaver.com. And or just go to CBS or whatever. I mean, it's that'll be out. And in answer to the question, how involved am I? It's zero. I am a producer, but that's kind of a technical uh, thing to get me some pocket change, and so I don't really have a lot to do with it, which is fine with me because I have 100% control over the books I write. Isabella and I have 100% control over the books we write. You're involved in a TV show or movie. That's a project by committee. And aside from this particular project, I don't play well with others.
Yeah. I mean, now, was that something that you've ever done? Have you ever tried to adapt any of your stuff or written anything original for either of you? Is that something that interests either of you to do? Uh-oh. Uh, I think we got disconnected there. At least I did for a second. Sorry about that.
Oh, no.
What's that? I'm sorry.
I said I think something happened there. There was a little bit of a blip. I was asking just I don't know if either of you had answered, but basically I was saying like, is there anything that you guys had you ever adapted any of your work? Is that something that interests you?
No, I never have.
No, I haven't either. It's a different skill set.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all right. Well, so the time remaining, is there anything that you've like read recently that you've really enjoyed that you want to recommend, or anything you've watched, anything you listened to? I know Jeffrey said you were recently at a concert. Is there anything that you would recommend to anybody?
Um,
Actually, you know what? I'll speak up about this. Since we were just talking about, understanding the reader and writing for the reader, and that is something that Jeff and I, that's like our mantra, is it's all about the reader. What we do is in service of the reader. And so right now, I mean, I just finished reading. It's an older book. It's Kurt Vonnegut wrote a book called Pity the Reader, or I'm sorry, he didn't write it, but it was like a biography of him written by one of his students. But apparently, when he was teaching writing classes, which he did for decades, he would say, pity the reader. And then he explained about why he writes, how he writes, and how he's always thinking about the reader. And reading is like you are asking someone to do something that is a little more challenging. And so you need to write in a manner that is smooth and digestible, and your object is not to be so dense that people can't get through it. And you were, like Jeff had mentioned earlier, about not being interested in that whole literary fiction and criticism world, and Kurt Vonnegut had to live through that and the slings and arrows of that literary world, and he suffered at times with that, and it was challenging for him. So it's a very, very interesting book about his approach to writing, which I found really fascinating.
Yeah.
And
What about
in
you,
my
Jeffrey?
case, I just happened to since my eyes aren't so great at a certain age, and I stare at the screen and reread my own work a great deal. I tend to listen to books more on Audible, as Robert, you and I have talked about, and I just was listening to it was an NPR podcast, had nothing to do with, well, it was about politics, but at the end, people said, we don't want to talk about politics. What is something fun you've done lately? And one of the podcasters said he had read a book that was absolutely compelling and charming. And I said, well, here's a good book sell. And I looked up to make sure I have the author's name. I listened to it in one sitting. It's called I Cheerfully Refuse by Leif, Leif Enger, Leifenger. And it is about a sort of a post-apocalyptic world in which books have lost all their value, dot, 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 except maybe they haven't. And so I would strongly recommend it's just short. It's a wonderfully stylistic book, so I would recommend that.
Great. And again, the title was
I cheerfully refuse.
Cheerfully Refuse. Okay, very good. And
And
then
look it up.
I think you said you both have just some more virtual events coming up.
Mhm.
Any live events that people should be aware of? I think Jeffrey, you said in the green room you had something coming up in Germany.
I'll be in Munich at the book fest there. It's a Hugendubel, that's a book chain. I will be appearing there, and might possibly be in the Czech Republic, but that will be still up in the air. We'll see about that.
What about you, Isabella? Do you have any events coming up that you want people to be aware of?
I've not the in-person stuff. I do have a lot of virtual things, and really the best place to find those is on my website, isabellamaldonado.com. If you look under events, there's like links to the virtual things that I have. So Jeff and I already did our in-person stuff a couple days ago.
Yeah, at Poison Pen. All right.
Yeah.
Well, then finally, if people want to stalk you online, where's the best place to find you both?
Yeah. The websites that we gave, yeah, that was be the way to do it.
And then is there a particular social media that you find yourself more active on than others?
For me, it's Instagram and actually, weirdly, TikTok. Those I've been sort of doing more with lately.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do Instagram and Meta. I mean Facebook, and then I'm not X. I quit X, but I'm on Blue Sky. But the website is really
Hmm.
the main thing. JeffreyDeaver.com.
Hmm.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right, perfect. Well, thank you both for making time today. I really appreciate it. And I know you both are very busy. I'm sure, Jeffrey probably wrote a short story earlier today or something. And
Did you
Yeah.
notice my
um,
hands going like this? Yes. Well,
but
murder.
obviously the new book is The Grave Artists. The authors are Jeffrey Deaver and Isabella Maldonado. You can find this, obviously, it was just released by Amazon, but it's available as an ebook, as a paperback hardcover, and as an audiobook.
Hmm.
And also in other languages. I'm assuming Fatal
Hmm.
Intrusion. How many languages has that been translated into at this point? Do you know off the top of your head?
I haven't counted what
A
Japanese,
ton. We'll say it's been a
Italian,
ton.
French, Italian, Japanese, Czech. Um,
German. We just got Germany.
okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I can't I can't remember with that book, but
Well, we'll just say it's all over the world. It's worldwide, so everyone
It is
definitely has
international.
no. Yeah. So
yeah.
so uh, so definitely nobody has no excuse not to check them out. So thank you again for making time, and we'll see everybody next time.